Hey friends, I'm Sabrina, the rookie around here. John and Dick are the old school American fans of F1. Thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation we had about Oscar Piastri. As we shared during our Rookies episode, it's tough to get into F1, and it's even tougher to stay in there. The guys and I discuss Oscar's road to Formula One and long-term prospects. Quick note, we recorded this episode before Red Bull and Alphatauri's announcement about Nyck De Vries. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, gentlemen, we have been talking about rookies, and specifically we're going to look at Oscar Piastri. I would like to help our listeners understand how he got onto the F1 grid. I think he's very notable for being highly sought after. And for those who were paying attention to F1 last year, they may be aware of the contract battle that happened and really see some of the principles that we had talked about in our general conversation about rookies, where it's tough to get onto the F1 grid. It's even tougher to stay in there. And how does that apply to Oscar? So John, let me start with you. I'm going to run down some kind of general questions. With Oscar, where is he from? Like, what's his home country? And do they have a driver development program that was focused on F1?
Oscar was born in Melbourne, Australia. He's 22 years old. Same as Logan, our American driver. Interestingly, while they do have driver development, the racing in Australia is very intense and it's quite good. And they do have a tendency to send drivers to Europe. It's very interesting that Oscar started racing with remote control cars, and he was a nationally ranked remote control racer. But he started go-karting early on, won championships in Australia, and then very early on moved into Europe in karting and began to race karts in Europe successfully.
Where did he do any of his academies or teams during those times?
The typical route early on in Australia is Formula Ford 1600, and then moving up from there. But he actually did not do any car racing in Australia. He was in Europe by that time racing karts. That's another thing that he has in common with Logan, is that when they were teenagers, they moved to Europe to race go-karts. And so from that, then he moved into cars with funding from his father, who owned a tuning company.
Let's talk about getting his actual F1 seat. Did the teams court him, or was it a struggle to get onto the grid?
They courted him big time. The reason that they courted him very, very intensely was because of his record. He raced 2 seasons in Formula 4 in England and did very well there. He had 6 wins in his second year, 2017. He had 6 wins and 6 pole positions, and he finished second place in that championship to another very good driver. Then he moved into Formula Renault Euro Cup, which is a racing series throughout Europe instead of, say, focused in Britain. And that put him in contact with a bunch of other drivers from other countries. And when he went into that, he was in Formula Renault for 2 years also. First of all, he was with a team called Arden. And the second year, even though he got 3 podiums, he didn't win any races that year. But the next year, I think showing how astute he is as a driver, or the people who are managing him are astute, he moved to the championship winning team from 2018, and that was Race Ace GP. He won victories there, and he won the championship that year also. So in his first European series, he won the championship in his second year. So that was a good sign, and the teams were paying attention to him. In fact, Christian Horner said that he could have signed him in 2017, and he failed to do that. It's a regret that he has, and I think pretty obviously why now. But then after he raced in Formula Renault, he moved to Formula 3. And in Formula 3, he was only there 1 season, and he came away with the championship then. And that was a fantastic season and a fantastic result. So because he was then a champion in Formula 3, he moved into Formula 2. And again, in Formula 2, he won the championship again, but he did it in a way that had only been done 2 times before him. He was the third driver to win the title in his first year in Formula 2. And the people that he was compared to, the others who won that in their rookie year, Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Hulkenberg, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell. So his credentials were so well established that they were all looking for him. And he did sign after that with the Renault Academy, and that's where he began his move into Formula One, was as a member of the Renault Academy.
Wow. I mean, that is a list that is quite impressive. So when you look at that, John, what do you think about his pathway to F1?
I think he is the ideal person to look to see what it takes to successfully make it to Formula One, not as a guarantee, but an almost guarantee. When you have a person who is winning championships, especially at the upper levels in their rookie year, that's a very, very special person. They're proving that that they are a complete racing car driver. They understand how to accommodate the increase in power, the increase in braking, all of the things that they have to deal with. They're able to take on a bigger, more complex team structure and thrive within it. And typically, they're coming up against teammates who are very, very good. His teammates, I think, in Formula 2 were Logan and I can't remember who else, but he was paired against some really good teammates. Pocheri, I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but the French driver who is quite good. And likely is coming to Formula One at some point.
Dick, you want to jump in here and add anything?
I think in Oscar's case, because of winning those championships as a rookie, you have to consider him to be a bit of a phenom, because he really did have a career in the junior formula that looked kind of like a hockey stick. And like I said, that's not usually the case with these guys. Usually that's not normal. And so I think Oscar's one of those guys that in the right situation with the right car and all that probably will wind up showing the world that he's really something special.
John, what do you think most people miss when they evaluate Oscar?
Well, I think that what most people fail to see is his background. They fail to see how successful he was early on. He just comes on the scene as a new name in the new season of Formula One. And for the most part, we just don't know anything about him. But if you dig into it a little bit and you look at his background, you see that 2019, he had 7 race wins out of 19 races. In 2020, he had 2 race wins out of 18 and finished both of those years. He was the champion. And then when he goes to Formula 2 in 2021, he had 6 race wins and 5 pole positions and was the champion. When you just see him as one of the other guys who's coming into the sport, you don't have to be a genius. If you just go back and look at their record a little bit, you can look at Jenson Button's record. You can look at Lewis Hamilton's record, at Nico Rosberg's record. If you go back and look at their seasons in the years leading up to Formula One, you can be an expert too if you're a newbie, because you can see that these guys have been extremely successful as they're coming up through the ranks.
Okay. So what is the runway for him to prove himself now that he's on the grid? And do you think even in this short, we're not quite to the midway of this calendar, do you think he's living up to that hype? And absolutely. I say hype in a very gracious way, right? Like I'm trying to take it from what you have already shared about him, that there was a lot to be impressed with. And as Dick said, the hockey stick aspect of his career. Do you think Oscar is bringing in that same caliber that he had in all the other series?
Absolutely. He reminds me a bit of Robert Kubica, who came in and went straight to the front of the grid. And had it not been for his rallying accident, he would be a multiple-time world champion, I think. I think that Oscar is the same way. At the Grand Prix celebration in Britain just this past weekend, Lando was on stage with him, and Lando was trying to talk, and the fans were hollering, "Oscar, Oscar, Oscar." So, yeah, he's living up to the hype. The hype is well-deserved. As Dick said, racing should be and tends to be a meritocracy, and he's earned his place. He is going to be one of the great drivers, assuming that he gets in the right car. But I think that, first of all, he's with a team that understands how to develop drivers, which is a key thing, even though they're not a front team right now. I don't know how long his contract with them is, but he has real opportunities as seats become available, especially in the 25-26 range. He has real opportunities to be recruited into a top team, again, based upon his previous record and based upon the record that he's building now in Formula One.
So it sounds like you've answered a little bit of my next question, which is, do you think he has a bright future? It sounds like you think he does. There's nothing right now based off of past and current performance for you to think it's not looking bright for him.
No, I think he has a great future. I see him as a multiple-time world champion, assuming he gets into the right car in the right time frame, which would be, most people say that it takes about 3 years for a rookie to acclimate to the entire Formula One maturation process. It seems to me that he's really well on his way. He was a test driver for McLaren and for Alpine before coming into Formula One. So while he was still in Formula Two, he was their reserve and test driver. So he had experience driving the cars. Now he has experience this year of racing the cars against the people that he has to beat. He's very close to Lando. He would have been third at the British race, which would have been his first podium before the midpoint of the season, his first season. So yes, I think his future is very, very bright. And if I were a betting man, I'd put money on him being a world champion in the next 5 years.
Well, and even the British Grand Prix, the podium, it really wasn't for his lack of skill. It was the safety car and the tire decision, I think, that really had the greater impact. Which,
I'll guarantee you this. Every team manager was watching that, and they know that he deserved third place except for the safety car.
Right.
Dick, do you have anything you want to jump in and add?
No, I think probably about the only thing that I would add is if you look at his performance as the year goes on, the gap between him and Lando has become closer and closer. First, Lando, as you would expect, because there's limited testing, all those kinds of things, right? And those are stacked against any rookie. It was kind of telling, in my opinion, that at first he was, he wasn't embarrassing himself, but he was getting fairly convincingly handled by Lando. But as the season has gone on, the gap between the two drivers has become smaller and smaller. And that's just another sign of a guy that not only has a lot of talent, but he's got a lot of intelligence too.
Well, and I think one of the aspects of this conversation I hope our listeners will gather, especially if they've only been watching F1 for a few years, is yes, there was a lot of discussion about the contract battle between Alpine and McLaren last year. And it's understandable why he was so highly sought after. I hope based off of what John has shared and that you've added into, Dick, they would also see that it's much bigger than that drama that was put out in the media, that he is really doing some good work here in F1. We should be able to see some even greater accomplishments as he continues to acclimate himself, because his track record proves to us that he has that capacity. It's exciting to look at a young driver and watch his development. Yep. Okay. Well, so on that note, I will say thank you, gentlemen, for this conversation on Oscar Piastri. I look forward to our other conversations on the other rookies. Okay, friends. What did you think of this conversation? The guys and I want to know what you thought. Drop me a line via email, Sabrina@2guysagirlandf1.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We're going to discuss each of the current rookies on the grid. Are you following us on social media? We're in all the usual places. Follow us. Thanks to those who are sending messages and comments. Feedback from you, our listeners, our Two Guys, a Girl in F1 community has been humbling and really encouraging to John, Dick, and me. We know that this is a crowded market, so your words have been and continue to help us build a community and content that we believe in. Thank you. Based on your feedback, we know that if someone hears us, they stick around. So we need your help to get higher in the podcast rankings. Please take a moment to rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. Continue sharing our show with your fellow F1 fans. It's listeners like you that are making this podcast a success. It's your endorsement that helps us build the Two Guys, a Girl, and F1 community. Maybe you're new to the podcast. If so, check out our earlier episodes where John, Dick, and I share our F1 origin stories. And if you're a rookie to F1, then check out our F1 101 episode, Consider it a primer, the tip of the iceberg. And thank you to our followers who are supporting the show. You are making this show possible. John, Dick, and I don't take it for granted. If you're not a member already, check out the Support the Show link in the episode notes. And with that, let me say, that ends this conversation. But rest assured, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in, because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.